On today's show, the Hawks at the 60-game mark, plus a new contract for Dom Barlow and much more, and all that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1921 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening into Monday here at the beginning of the new month of March. And today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel. Right now, if you're a new customer at FanDuel, you get $150 in terms of dollars in bonus bets. If your first bet of $5 or more happens to win. Check it all out now at FanDuel.com. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you find your podcasts. That includes Apple and Spotify on the audio side, and we are also on YouTube on the video side. Please like this video as you're watching it, as well as subscribing and telling your friends about the podcast. And a lot to get to on a Sunday night edition of the show. The Hawks have not played since Friday, but if you missed that, I talked about that game in detail on this same podcast feed. The Hawks do return to action on Monday evening in Memphis. We'll kind of do a little bit of a mini preview of that game at the end of the podcast, but in the meantime, some news and a kind of round number check-in as the Hawks have played 60 games so far. Also, it's a new month, so kind of a good time to go and kind of dive back into how the season's gone so far. But the news that broke on Sunday will begin this episode, and that is the fact that Dom Barlow will be, it seems to be, and I think it's been confirmed now multiple times in some respects, will be signing a new standard contract with the Atlanta Hawks. So Barlow's been on a two-way deal with the Hawks all year long. If you're not familiar with his work, he is the 21-year-old big man out of overtime elite. So with the Spurs before this, et cetera, et cetera. Shams Charania of ESPN reported on Sunday afternoon that the Hawks were, quote, converting, end quote, Dom Barlow to a 2-year standard contract. We'll come back to that in a second on the word converting. But a lot of moving parts here. So I'm recording this podcast at about 7:30 p.m.-ish Eastern time on Sunday evening. I tried to wait as long as I could, but a lot of uncertainty about this deal and how it kind of unfolds, as well as the kind of the CBA nerd stuff here. I made a lot of phone calls about this, got some confirmations, but we'll see how this all goes. So the number one thing that a source did confirm is that the Barlow is going to be going on to a standard deal. So this reporting from Shams on that front is going to happen. I'll start there. Not a surprise if you listen to the podcast in recent days and weeks. In fact, I kind of I said on the show that I would have tried to do this if I was the Hawks. As soon as they opened up a roster spot about 3.5 weeks ago by waiving Bones Highland, I posited at that point that I would be trying to get Dom Barlow on a team-friendly multi-year contract with the Hawks if I was them and signing him to use that roster spot. Crucially, as of right now, we do not know the details of this contract. We don't know the length. We don't know the money, the guarantees, any of that stuff. When I do find that out and when it becomes publicly reported, I'll discuss it probably later on this week. But regardless of that for now, I do believe that Barlow is a full standard contract kind of player in the NBA. He's still 21 years old, some real upside. He can play a little bit now, talented player. And I love the two-way deal when they gave it to him this summer. That was a home run of a two-way, in my opinion. And now I think this is a right decision as well to go ahead and bring him on to a full deal at this point in time. So, number one, congrats to him, Dom, on his pay raise and a new standard contract, even before we find out the rest of the structure. But it's a big TBD on all of the other stuff again, years, dollars, guarantees, all of that stuff. Now, from there, we get to the logistics of how this is going to happen, both contractually, CBA stuff. There's a lot going on here. So if you're not deep diving into the NBA nerdery, I understand that, but there's a lot of stuff that kind of matters here with how this is all moving. So the biggest thing is that as of right now, when I'm recording this podcast Sunday evening, the Hawks will actually have a roster spot open. Maybe. So they can't officially sign Barlow until they have some clarification on that. They did have an open spot available for about 20 days after waiving Bones Highland, but if you missed it from Friday and Saturday, the Hawks actually signed Kevon Harris, who's been in College Park all year long, basically with the G League team, to a 10-day contract that was announced on Saturday. That would have been their 15th and final roster spot on full contract, so they don't really have an open spot right now and have to do something else in order to sign Barlow to a standard contract. That's a simple version. They have to do something else. So the timing is a little bit strange. I got questions about this, and I definitely understand why. It was just kind of strange. Like they were flexible for 3 weeks. They filled the spot, and then like 25 hours later, they signed this contract. Citing Barlow's agent, by the way, Shams reported it via Barlow's agent, so that's kind of where he got that from. It seems like but the timing is odd, including questions from me, et cetera, et cetera. There's one wrinkle that I want to mention. I just want to mention here one that John Hollinger brought up, one that I brought up on Blue Sky today, et cetera, is the potential for a hardship exemption. So long story short, teams can qualify for a hardship exception that allows you to have at least briefly have an extra roster spot when a team has at least 4 players being out for at least 3 games, which the Hawks do have, and the exception also dictates that all 4 players are expected to be out for at least 2 more weeks, which the Hawks, I think, probably have right now. And one more, they have to have at least one of their extra players, if they were to do this, have a 10-day contract, which is now what Kevon Harris is on. So I think if you go one by one there, the Hawks probably qualify at this point in time. Now, the only debate is, would Vit Krejci be, by the way, he'll be reevaluated pretty soon. Will he be out for at least 2 more weeks reasonably? That's reasonable, I think, to say yes, but the Hawks haven't said that. And crucially, they have to apply for that. You don't just automatically get it. You have to go to the league and say, all right, we want to do this. Give us the exception, et cetera, et cetera. So perhaps that's the reason. Perhaps that's the explanation that we're going to get in the next couple of days. Maybe the Hawks have already gotten this exception. We just don't know it yet. And that's how they're going to do the Barlow contract. That's one pathway, and probably the cleanest one, honestly, if they were to have that exception granted to them. So we'll find that out maybe it's as soon as Monday. We will see. But that's one option. Another would be that they have to do something else, whether it be, they also could just waive Kevon Harris right now. It'd be a little bit strange to sign a guy to a 10-day contract and waive him before it's over, but it's not unprecedented. You definitely can do that. It's not guaranteed beyond 10 days, so they could just kind of send Kevon back to College Park, waive him. People ask me, could they waive somebody else? They could, but they don't really have anybody else that's a natural waiver candidate. I know Garrett Matthews is not playing right now, but he's a guy that the Hawks do think has value at his current number. He is a good shooter if they need some spacing, if they need the help there. You've got Clint Capella, but he's playing, and it's too late to buy him out. By the way, the buyout deadline is now passed, at least as far as guys being available to play in the playoffs, so no reason to do that. Kobe Buffko, somebody else, they're not going to do that. So they don't really have a natural buyout / cut candidate other than Kevon Harris, who they just signed. So if they don't get the exception, they could just cut Kevon. But in the meantime, the cleanest way would be to get that exception. But we'll see on that. A couple more things here. And apologies again for the nerdery here, but it's all kind of important. A notable factor here is that March 4th, which is Tuesday, is the deadline to sign 2-way contracts. So importantly, that is not a deadline to actually have someone like Barlow to move off of a 2-way. But if the Hawks move Barlow off, as they're going to do, and wanted to replace him on a 2-way, they have to do that by the end of Tuesday, which means they have to move Dom off of it to sign somebody else. Now, you don't have to sign all 3 2-ways. The Hawks have all 3 right now. That's not mandated. You don't have to carry all 3. They can go open. But if they want to have Barlow done by Tuesday, one reason for that speed or the timing would be to open that spot up for somebody else, whether it be Nikola Jurisic, the second-round pick from last year, could be a natural option, maybe even Kevon Harris, et cetera, et cetera. There's some flexibility, but if they want to be able to re-sign somebody else besides Dom to a 2-way, it's got to be done by Tuesday. That's just notable. Also, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the word converting or conversion, quote unquote, that Shams used is not correct in the context that he used it. So no, it's either one thing or the other. Now he's obviously getting that from the agent or whatever, but there are only 2 options here. A team can unilaterally, which means on their own, convert a guy from a 2-way contract to a full standard deal if they want to. But if they do that, it's only for the rest of that season. It is not a multi-year deal. It's only for the rest of that year. You cannot do a unilateral conversion for multiple seasons. It's only this year. Or you can sign a guy to a multi-year contract, as Shams noted that he thinks it is and reported that it is, but then it's not a conversion. You have to mutually agree on a multi-year deal with the player, which means that, again, player and team. Barlow's agent has agency in this. You can't, again, there's only one option to convert somebody. It's just the rest of the season. If they want control, as the Hawks probably do on Barlow for multiple years, you have to get the other agent involved, get the player involved, and have a mutually agreed upon contract. So that's kind of why there's a little bit more uncertainty on, again, years, dollars, guarantees, all that stuff. If it's a conversion, it's only this year. And Sean's reported multiple years. I have heard multiple years, but we will see on that in final. And then the last thing here is that one reason why you might want to have Dom not be on a 2-way is that this happened last year. If you're a Hawks diehard, remember this. If you're on a 2-way at the end of the season, you cannot play in the playoffs. So last year, the shining example of this was Vit Krejci, who was in the rotation all the way to the end of the year and then could not play in the play-in game. Now, obviously, Barlow's not in the rotation right now, but he's one injury away because Larry Nance may be out for the season. Nobody said that, but he certainly, if you look at the timeline, could miss the rest of the year. And right now, Barlow is one even small injury away from playing. And if they want him to be available, that's one reason potentially why. For me, that's a smaller factor than getting him on a multi-year contract because I think he has real upside long term. But it would have made sense at some point to get either Barlow or Keaton Wallace off of a two-way and onto a full contract, if nothing else, to have them be available to play in the playoffs. So I know that's a lot of information, but that's kind of what the lead story was on Sunday. I had another podcast topic that we'll save for later, but we'll get into more stuff on this podcast. But that's kind of the big story today. Again, what we do know, Barlow, full contract. What we don't know is how he's going to get there, the years, the dollars, the guarantees, and we'll hopefully have more of that. And by the way, I'll have a show in 24 hours from now after the game on Monday. So if we get anything else on Monday, I'll talk about it on the podcast tomorrow. Or if you want real-time updates, I'll have stuff on Twitter/X at BT Rowland. I'll also have stuff at Patreon at patreon.com/BT Rowland. All right. We have more to come on this podcast with some mailbag questions, a look at the Hawks after 60 games, and more. And it's all coming up in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, the NBA action is getting started, and there's no better way to get into action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you got actual live bets throughout the game. So even if you actually miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter or comebacks or whatever, stay in the action with FanDuel. And the live betting feature also allows you to have every moment of the game be exciting. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can actually combine the bets together into a same-game parlay. Plus, they have offerings like over-unders and point spreads, money lines, futures, player props, game props, and much more. And the FanDuel app is also safe and secure. They cover the entire range of sports. That includes basketball stuff like the NBA, college basketball, WNBA, as well as football with the NFL, college football, MLB, hockey, golf, tennis. They have soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. And plus, the app is really easy to use at FanDuel. When you win, you also get paid instantly. Right now, if you're a new customer to FanDuel, get $150 in bonus bets. If your $5 bet, first $5 bet, I should say, happens to win. Plus, the place to go is FanDuel.com. Join up today, and that's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so the new month is here. The Hawks' February run is over. March is now upon us, and they've also played a round number of games with 60. They are 27-33, of course, at this point in time. And I got a very long mailbag question from a listener named Rome. Shouts to Rome for the question. I couldn't read the whole thing. It was very, very long, paragraphs and paragraphs, etc. But the big kind of gist of it was the following. It says, you try to give context, and I know some appreciate it and some don't, but have the Hawks met your expectations this season, or have they not? So, again, intriguing question here, part of a larger thing, but it's a good, relevant question. Obviously, you don't want to do this every time there's a game or every week or whatever, but it's a good, again, round number, new month. Have the Hawks met my expectations this year? Just to say this, they're on a 37-win pace right now. This is not end-all, be-all, but that is almost exactly what they were projected to do widespread preseason. That's actually a little bit better than they were projected to do by the over-unders and the betting markets and all these things, and ESPN, all these things. That's actually a little bit higher than they were projected. But I'll frame it this way. If you told me that Jalen was going to miss 40% of the season to date and more, by the way, so that's only just till right now. Also that Bogey would have a terrible season, honestly, and then get traded. Capella would decline. They'd also lose Bucket for the season and be without Krejci and Nance for a long time. I would have guessed, if you told me all of that, they would be worse than they've been so far. That seems fair to me to say out loud. Now, at the same time, things went well as well. Dyson Daniels has really had a great season, for instance. Okongwu breaking out a little bit, as we'll talk about later on. So it's not like everything's been bad, but there's been enough that's gone wrong. And again, the number one thing by a mile is Jalen being out for 24 of the first 60 games. That's a big factor for your second best player on your roster. So through that lens, I would say broadly, they've met my expectations or slightly exceeded them to this point. Now, broadening it out, I would say that either way, but I also would note that my expectation preseason, my prediction on this podcast and in written form elsewhere, was about 40 wins for this team, which is, again, above what the median national projection was, but also maybe below somebody else's around Hawks fans or whatever you want to say that. So I was definitely on the higher side, but not the absolute highest side, if that makes sense. I think at the very least, they were as good as I envisioned with Jalen playing. They were about 500 or a little bit better than that with Jalen in the lineup. That's the team I thought they were going to be this season, basically. And then he went down. So the answer to the question depends on, honestly, what you expected. And that's not a cop-out, I promise you. But I find that has to do with all sports, not just the Hawks, not just the Braves, another team I cover, but other cities, other leagues, whatever. It comes down like whether a team met projections is like, okay, what were the projections? What did you expect them to do? What was reasonable in your mind? I tend to live in that realistic zone to a fault sometimes, and I know I do it to a fault sometimes. I'm a little bit too level-headed, if anything, at certain points. I might be better suited to ride the roller coaster a little bit more for reactions, but that's what I tend to look at that through that lens of like, okay, what did I actually expect? I picked the Hawks for 40 wins this year with reasonable injury luck, and outside of Jalen, they've had reasonable injury luck. Unfortunately, the second best player on the team missing the final like 40 games of the year is not reasonable injury luck. That's a little bit worse than you would expect. But if you thought, and I know some did, Hawks fans, Hawks bloggers, whatever, had the Hawks in that 45 win range preseason. I mean, that would have been certainly very rosy, but if that's what you thought, then they are below what you thought. So that's, again, it comes back to what you thought they were going to be in October. I won't go through all the players. That would take a long time, but there are certain guys who've definitely gone above their projections so far in 60 games. I think number one on that list with a bullet is Dyson Daniels. I loved that trade. I loved Dyson Daniels. I was effusive in praising Dyson Daniels this summer about his defense in particular. And even then, I was not as high as I could have been on Dyson Daniels. Dyson's been better than even I thought. And I was on the very high end of that transaction, I would say. So he's the one guy on the roster that I would say has soundly outperformed what anyone could have thought he would be this year. To already have basically be a top 60, 70 player in the league after this first season in a bigger role, 21 years old, like that's been an awesome projection. So he's the solid number one on that list of like guys who've overperformed this year. I thought DeAndre Hunter pre-trade was outperforming what people could have expected from him. That's a fair statement, I think. Obviously, he got traded. There you go. Other guys have kind of met where I thought they would be. Trae Young. Now, my baseline with Trae is pretty high. I think Trae's very good. He hasn't exceeded it, but he's also led the league in assists, and he's been really, really good this year. Not incredible, shooting-wise, et cetera, but still having a meets season for him. Ricochet, maybe in that same range. Okongwu probably in that same range somewhere. I won't go through the whole roster, but like there's only really one guy and 1.5 if you count Hunter that's like way above what I would have projected. Now, there are guys who have been below. I think Bogey was way below projections when he was playing with the Hawks. Obviously, he's been traded, so maybe him and Hunter cancel out, however you want to say that. But Bogey was way, way, way below. I think Capella in his current form is way below. Now, earlier in the year, he was playing kind of what I thought he was going to be able to do this year. So he's kind of maybe in that slightly below average overall and trending downward based on the last couple of weeks, that kind of thing. But overall, you got one guy way above Dyson, one guy way below, and Bogey before he got traded. Everybody else at least hovering around projections for me. From a team standpoint, I do understand that it feels worse right now than it probably actually is because they are losing more right now. Again, without Jalen, it's not the same team, which is just, it's not an excuse. It's just the reality. That's what they are. They're not the same team without Jalen. And also they've just been tough schedule, all those things recently. They've lost some games they probably should have. And that I know, and by the way, that's human nature. I do the same thing in other sports, Michigan, Braves, Falcons, whatever. Recency bias does creep in. It just does. That's the reality. But I would also say, in trying to zoom out, they have a better win percentage right now, even post this little swoon and with Jalen out for the season, than they had last year. And I'm a record on this that's broken. I understand that. But this summer, they made, if anything, they made future-facing moves. They were not trying to go all in on this season by any means. They obviously were doing future-facing moves. They've had Ricochet, a rookie, starting all year long. They traded DeJounte for Dyson. Granted, I think Dyson's better than DeJounte already, but they couldn't have thought that probably at the time. The whole thing was Dyson and 2 first-round picks to restock the coffers. They made future-facing moves this summer. And even if you don't believe that they're better than last year, and I think they are, especially with Jalen, they were almost certainly going to be better this year. Even if you say they're neutral, even slightly below, which I would not do, you did that while making your future so much brighter. So it makes a lot more sense. Anyway, I'll stop on that for now. But I think my answer to this question is that they've met expectations, even if you ignore context. And if you factor in Jalen's injury, I think I'd be even more in the meetings / maybe slightly exceeding camp. Not like they're not shattering my expectations by any means. No one's saying that, but I think I'd be somewhere in that middle range, especially when you factor in what's kind of challenged them in recent days. All right, question from David, who says, I've never been an Okongwu fan as the main center, but I was pleasantly surprised by the numbers that you shared for him in February. Is he turning the corner? And are there still concerns about him as the main guy? So I'll keep it short here, but Okongwu just had the best month of his career, which I talked about a little bit on Friday's show, so I won't repeat all that. But he averaged 15.3 points, 9.6 rebounds, and 3.2 assists per game in February. So 15, almost 10 rebounds and 3 assists. Really good there. That's career highs, by the way, for any month in scoring and assists. Rebounds was close as well. 67% true shooting for the month. And yes, the Hawks were only 5-7 last month, but they were, here's the crucial point, they were 8 points per 100 better with Okongwu on the court than off the court. He was not the reason why they were not winning games. He was playing really well, and it was the other minutes when he was not on the floor where they were losing those games. Of course, that does not guarantee that he'll be this guy moving forward. It is a real sample size for him, though, and he's handling the bigger role well, in my opinion. Now, the only thing that would hold me back from saying that this is definitely going to be him moving forward is that he's always had some questions about his consistency. That's just a reality in year 4.5 now, year 5 for him. And that he's only played 55 games or more in one of his first 4 seasons. So there's been injuries and consistency issues. You can't overcome that in 1 month. But if you knock on wood, he has been durable this year. He's missed 7 games. That's totally fine. He's on pace to play somewhere in the 70, 75 game range. That's great. You'll take that all day long from a starter. As far as whether they're concerns or not, I wouldn't say there are huge concerns, other than he has not done it for a larger sample than this. But that's always the case until the guy actually does it. And look, I know there is a contingent of Hawks fans and NBA fans that just cannot accept Okongwu at center because of his height. That's just always going to be there. It'll never go away. Nothing I say will convince you if you had that thought. Trust me, I covered Al Horford. Al Horford is a fringe Hall of Famer, and there are still people who will tell me he wasn't a center, even though he played center and made all-star teams at center, et cetera, et cetera. I get it. There's a height thing. I'll stop there. But Okongwu has been playing center his entire life. He's a center now. He was a center last year and the year before and the year before. He's played 98% of his minutes in his career at center. And yes, could he play the 4 next to the perfect center? Sure, he could some, but he's a center. That's what he is. There are certain matchups where I will grant you it'd be better to have a 7-footer, like facing Jokic or whatever. But there are not that many matchups like that in the league, honestly. And Embiid's kind of not doing that anymore. There are only 2 or 3 guys that I would say you would want to have a bigger center. So I think it's not really a huge concern for me. Plus, he's very strong. He's very, very strong. And he's long for a guy who is his height. So it's overblown. I get the concern. I do. But he is a center, and he's held up just fine at that spot. The way that I would describe this moving forward is I won't go long on this, but I think he's unquestionably playing at the level of a starting center right now, like a solid starting center, which may not seem like a lot, but that means you're a top 20, 25 center in the league. That's the level he's been playing at for the last 6 weeks, 2 months, something like that. He's been playing really, really well. Now, he's not playing at the level of a star center. That's fair to say, but you don't have to have him be a star. He's making $15 million a year. It's a great contract, even if he's just a below average starter. And also, he unlocks the Hawks a lot offensively. He can do things as a passer, as a hub, as a versatile guy that they not every center can do. He unlocks a lot for them while still being able to hold up defensively. So yeah, not an elite rebounder. I get that. Not an elite shot blocker. I get that. But he's a versatile, talented player, and he's again playing very firmly at a starter level in the NBA, and that's a high bar for me. To be a firm starter level at a one position place like center. You're playing at a top 20-ish level at center in the league. Again, it's 6 weeks or whatever it is, but he's playing there, and the hope would be that he stays there in the future. I don't think I'm still going to have him be an all-star next year or anything like that, but nothing about the way that he's playing right now seems fluky to me. I think it's legitimate. I think it's sustainable. We'll see, but he just turned 24 years old. He's not even old. He's got 5-star pedigree. He was a lottery pick. There's a lot of talent and a lot of pedigree, and if he can, knock on wood, stay healthy, that's a big thing for me, but stay healthy, be consistent. He's playing really well. I think there's a lot to be encouraged by with Okongwu right now. All right, more to come in just 1 second, including a Grizzlies preview after this. Today's show is sponsored by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 points or more in a game, you can score a huge deal in the next day with Dash Pass. It's simple. When any player in the NBA, 50 points or more during this season, Dash Pass members get 50% off and order up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. After an epic 50-point performance, celebrate by ordering wings or pizza or burgers from your favorite spots delivered straight to your door. Or perhaps if you were a late night person like I am, and looking for a snack at the very end of your day, use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. Or if you want lunch on the go, also use Dash Pass to get your favorite meals with $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees as well. Plus, now you can save even more with this exclusive NBA offer. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. On any player, 50 points or more, Dash Pass members get 50% off and order the next day up to $10 off. Just use the promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. All right, and with February wrapping up and March now here, I wanted to quickly note the Hawks do have 2 candidates for monthly awards for last month. That'll be probably announced on Monday afternoon, so keep that in mind. Listening to this on Monday afternoon or Monday evening, this will probably already be official. But the kind of looming factor, of course, is that the Hawks were 5-7, and oftentimes, in fact, my friends Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue refer to the NBA monthly awards as the story of the month awards because they tend to be narrative based to some degree, and a lot of that's team success, which might hurt both of these. But keep that in mind. But Trae Young for East Player of the Month is a real factor. I shared the stat today on social media, so it's not a spoiler there, but the Hawks were 18.6 points per 100 possessions better with Trae on the court last month. 18.6 points better. That's crazy. They were terrible without him last month, and that's the reason why they were 5-7 in some respects. Also, though, he has the regular case as well. He led the league in assists last month, as he has all year long. He also tied for the Eastern Conference lead in scoring last month, 28 points a game. So I think he may not win. In fact, I think Trae probably won't win, honestly, if I had to guess. You got Cade and that story there with their winning streak, Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell, etc. But Trae should be up there on the list as far as the candidates. And the second one is Richache for the East Rookie of the Month. He tied for the most points last month in the East among rookies. He shot 44% from 3. He did have a disastrous turnover game on Friday, on February 28th, literally. But even with that factored in, he averaged 1.1 turnovers per game in February. So good defense as well. The Hawks were positive on the court with him and underwater without him. He played well last month. I don't know if he'll win it, but keep that in mind as well. 2 just quick things there. Keep that if you want to look at that. I know Hawks fans tend to all fans, honestly, tend to follow those things when they come out. And the Hawks do have real candidacies, I should say, on Monday afternoon. All right, last thing here before we sign off on a Sunday into Monday. The Hawks play the Grizzlies on Monday on the road at FedEx Forum. They've only played Memphis once this year, as you might expect. It's only a 2-game per season matchup, given it's East versus West. The Hawks lost the first one at home before Christmas in December. That was a game without Trae Young, and also that was the height of the Hawks being just unable to take care of the ball at all without Trae. They had 25 turnovers in that game. It was ghastly on offense. My notes were hilarious looking back at them for this game. They couldn't take care of the ball. That was the whole reason they lost the game. They just were giving the ball away every time. It was crazy. But in the meantime, Memphis is good. Memphis is better than the Hawks. Let's just be honest about that. Broadly speaking, they are right now 38-22 on the year. Top 10 team on offense and on defense. They've run really good stuff offensively this year with their new assistant staff. They've actually gotten a lot of attention for that. They're difficult to guard as a result. They're also elite on the offensive glass this year. So the Hawks are going to have to box out quite a bit in this game. They will turn it over on offense, but they're also quite good, as we saw earlier this year, at creating turnovers defensively. That is notable to me. And also they like to run. But at the same time, they are really good half-court defense, not so good in transition defensively. And here's a notable point for you. At the moment, these are the 2 fastest-paced teams in the league. Memphis is number 1. Atlanta is number 2. So you might see a lot of points, a lot of possessions. I always recommend this, and I'm not scolding. It's just better. It's more accurate. I always try to use points per possession because the Hawks play at a super high pace, and it's not just the Hawks. Memphis is the same way. So not all 120-point games or 110-point games or 140-point games are created equally. How many possessions were there in the game? That definitely matters on the margins and kind of trying to be accurate on like how good the Hawks are on certain things. In fact, that comes up a lot because Atlanta is, again, so fast-paced that they are bottom 5 in the league in raw points allowed per game, but they're like number 16 in points per possession allowed, which is much more accurate on the defense, is that they play so fast. Keep that in mind. Anyway, Memphis is not playing that well lately, though. They are 3-6 in the last 9 games after they won 10 out of 11 before that. But most of that, from what I can see, has been schedule related. They have losses to OKC and New York and Cleveland and Indiana in that stretch. So like no real bad loss. They did lose to the Spurs 2 days ago, but that was without Ja, I think it was. Can't remember. No, it was yesterday. They lost to the Spurs on Saturday. They lost to the Spurs without Ja Morant and without Desmond Bane. So it was not really the normal Grizzlies. Keep that in mind. Speaking of that, though, Ja Morant is questionable for the game on Monday. Notable in that he is their most famous player. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is their best player, but they're not as good without Ja. I'll be very clear about that. If you're the Hawks, you have a better chance, broadly speaking, if Ja does not play versus when he does play, all that stuff. But Memphis is not the team that drops off a lot without their star. Like the Hawks have a huge drop off in their numbers when Trey plays versus when he doesn't play. Jokic has the same thing. Like most stars, it's a big drop. For the Grizzlies, for multiple years now, they don't get that much worse when Ja doesn't play. And part of that's the credit to them. They're a good team and they're deep and all those things. But it's not the biggest drop if he doesn't play. Keep that in mind. But on the Hawks side, they had their first illness or absence since the break. That's a new absence. Obviously, they're without 4 guys right now for a long time. But George Niang is out. He is out with illness for the game on Monday. I presume he's not even going to travel because they ruled him out on Sunday. It's a back-to-back for the Hawks, back to Atlanta. So if there was any doubt at all, it makes sense to leave him at home totally. But that's a big loss. I know Hawks fans are kind of all over the place on Yang already so far in his career, but he is their best shooter of the guys who is playing right now. He's the one guy on the team that could play the forward, shoot like that. So that's a big loss for in some respects. We'll see how the Hawks handle that rotationally. Could be more Mo Gay, I would guess. Could be some Dom Barlow. Could be some Keaton Wallace if they want to go smaller. Garrison Matthews, even Daquan Plowden. They can get creative here. Kevon Harris could debut tomorrow. We'll see. But they do have an absence there. And really, as far as like natural power forwards, they're pretty shallow now without Niang. I think Gay is playing the 4 mostly. Barlow is a combo big. Ricochet is kind of a combo 4, but certainly a little bit under strength wise at the 4 right now. So they'll have some lineups that they probably don't love to play in this game on Monday, and it'll be a challenge to be sure. Last thing, the Hawks are currently 6.5-point underdogs in the game in Memphis, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Not a crazy high number, but certainly the kind of indicative of Memphis being the better team on paper as they are with the record, et cetera, and the games in Memphis. So a tough challenge, but the Hawks have done well on the road this year. They've also done well against teams that are supposed to beat them in some respects. They've upset a lot of teams this year. The Hawks are, again, like one of the better teams in the league as far if you compare their home versus road. Their road's been pretty good this year. They're 14-17 on the road, so they won't be intimidated. Not a long trip. But we'll see how the Hawks handle Jaren and Desmond Bane and maybe Ja Morant on Monday evening. All right, lots of words said on this podcast. Hopefully you stuck around all the way to the end. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Apple and Spotify. We're on Amazon Music. We are on Overcast, all those places, Pocket Cast, etc. We're also on YouTube. Please like the show there. And also please tell your friends about the show. If you are enjoying the podcast, I very much appreciate it. But also it would be a huge favor to me if you were to help me spread the word, whether it be on social media, or on Reddit, email your friends, text your friends, whatever you want to do. I'm an old person, so I went to email right away. But hey, there you go. Subscribe to the show. I appreciate you listening to the podcast. We will have a show after the game on Monday, so we'll see you all after that one. Enjoy your Sunday evening into Monday, and we'll see you all next time.